Welcome to Regen Reviews, where we review projects and protocols working to regenerate the Earth. Today, we will be taking a look at the Basin project. Let's get into it. Basin is a real estate and land restoration focused project combining different legal structures, a DAO, which is like a Web3 organization, as well as a refi or regenerative finance protocol. Here's a map of the degraded lands on Earth. According to the Basin documentation, they cited over 75% of Earth's lands as being substantially degraded. From the perspective of Basin, degraded lands are an opportunity. Basin wants to connect people on the ground with the resources and tools they need to regenerate land. And a big part of Basin is being able to financialize carbon and natural capital to make these regenerative projects happen. To achieve this goal of regenerating degraded lands, Basin is utilizing a variety of human organizational structures. There's some very traditional ones like the Basin LLC, which is a centralized company to get this project started. There's a nonprofit Basin Foundation, founded here in Colorado. And soon they will be finalizing the Basin Trust and the Basin DAO. In addition to all these fundamental parts, they will be using a HOP structure, which stands for holding company, operating company, and property company. This is just a way to separate the assets into different legal structures so that, for example, if your operating company is doing something and gets sued, then it can't lose that property or its assets in the lawsuit because those assets are owned under the property company. The last key part of the Basin project is the Basin Property Protocol. It has four main aspects. The first is that it identifies degraded and undervalued and also pristine and threatened properties. Second, it evaluates them for climate impact and financial feasibility. Third, it onboards those properties and property rights at the lowest cost. And fourth, it connects all the tools and resources needed for climate project development. Thomas Morgan is the man who has founded this project. You can see he identifies himself as the founder here on his LinkedIn page and also as the author of the documents. His profile, from what I've seen, is legit. He has over 20 years of experience in the commercial real estate industry, so it seems like he really knows what he's doing in terms of the business side of real estate. And you can check out his videos on the Basin YouTube channel where he is much more genuine and you can connect to his why. He really wants to use his skills and connect people to be able to invest in restoring the Earth and regenerating the Earth. That's it for the short overview of the Basin project. This is still a work in progress, so some of the details I've shared might be subject to change. They have quite thorough documentation that I'll link to in the description of this video. They mentioned that they are looking to a public release in November of 2023. So stay tuned on that. And if you want to get more into the details, then check out the full video where I'll dive into more of the nitty-gritty of how this project is working. What is the problem and opportunity that Basin is addressing? Fundamentally, it is summed up here in this image about all the degraded land you can see in the earth. Also, the other aspect of this is that, quote, more than half of the world's GDP, approximately 44 trillion, is highly dependent on nature, and the value of nature is estimated to be somewhere between $5 and $9 quadrillion. So we have a lot of degraded land here, and we have an insane amount of value that nature is providing to us humans in terms of ecosystem services. Basin sees this opportunity, and from what I can tell, the core goal here is to be able to regenerate this land and quantify this kind of natural capital and financialize it so that we can value nature and the ecosystem services that it provides. Let's talk about the business structure that Basin will be employing to achieve its goals. So they've already created two elements. The Basin LLC is a corporation founded in Wyoming, or based in Wyoming, created by Andrew Pierce. And this seems to be the kind of centralized company that's spearheading the beginning of this project. And they've also already created the Basin Foundation, which is a nonprofit created in Colorado. And the details we have of this is that the Basin Foundation is the trustee of the Basin Trust and the trust enforcer. Upcoming creations yet to be finalized are the Basin DAO. This is like a member-managed community organization for governance, very Web3 decentralized focused, and that is in progress. And there's also the other important part here is the holding company called the Basin Trust. And this will be an evergreen, perpetual, permanent trust that will take a very long-term approach to governance and management. The other key part of this structure going forward is this HOP structure. HOP stands for holding company, operating company, and property company. The holding company is the Basin Trust. From what I can tell, there's only going to be one of these. It seems like the Basin Trust will be one very large, perpetual, evergreen trust focused on very long-term stewardship of the real estate assets that it will be holding. Next are the operating companies. And they're saying that the operating company operates the business aspects, and it is comprised of the people, products, and services. This will provide and connect all the things needed for climate real estate project development and make the network and protocol run. We have here opcos service the holdco and are users and vendors for propcos. So my understanding of this is that the operating companies, there will be many of these. If you have a piece of degraded land and you want to do a regenerative project on this land, you will create your own operating company to do that project, and that real estate won't be owned by the operating company. It'll actually be owned by the property company so that we can separate those legal entities in case, for example, I don't know what would happen, but something in your regeneration project goes wrong, someone sues you, they can't take your land because your land is being held by the property company and you're just leasing it. So this is like a corporate protection scheme that a lot of corporations use, where they use different legal entities in relation to each other. All right, let's talk about the property company. So the property company owns the property / real estate. And this is what I was explaining earlier, but here we have it here again. Rather than making the operations of the project tied to the property as one venture, we separate out the project operations from the real estate. By treating the use and the property as two different but interrelated financial mechanisms, it opens up access to and creates appeal for agnostic and indifferent capital. Capital that invests for its own financial mandates, not necessarily for climate, carbon, nature, or impact. So this is what I wasn't mentioning, is that this actually opens up more liquidity and investment. In addition to having the benefits I mentioned earlier about legal protection, it seems like this model of separating operations from real estate ownership allows more investment capital to flow. Basin is built to enable people to make a living regenerating the planet and their communities. People should be paid and paid well for this work. Financial wealth should accrue to those doing the work of fostering ecological wealth. That sounds great, doesn't it? I pulled this off of their page about revenues and their business structure. So let's take a look on how Basin will allow people to be paid and paid well for the work of regenerating the planet and their communities. The first revenue source for Basin projects is carbon. You've probably heard of carbon offsets or carbon credits. This is basically where some people can regenerate a forest in one part of the earth and sell carbon credits to a company that's polluting and releasing a lot of carbon somewhere else in the earth. So it seems to me like Basin wants to plug into this infrastructure, and they're also plugging into some kind of newer registries here. So you can see I've highlighted there the 4 revenue models that they have around carbon. And then here they've listed 4 registries/marketplaces that they are looking to work with. The second revenue model/source Basin is looking at is natural capital. This is similar to carbon, selling carbon offsets, but Basin is looking to pioneer a market for eco-credits and ecological assets. We know it's valuable to sequester carbon, and we have the ability to quantify that and sell that on a market and value that in the market. The next step is that we need to be able to quantify things like biodiversity and ecosystem services and bring market forces into that so we can flow money into regenerating these ecosystem services. Here's the quote again: more than half of the world's GDP, $44 trillion, is highly dependent on nature, and the value of nature is estimated to be somewhere between $5 and $9 quadrillion. So our current economic system doesn't value nature and the amazing ecosystem services that we depend on, and Basin is looking to pioneer the valuation of biodiversity and ecosystem services and use that funding, tokenization, credit market ability to be able to bring capital from investors who want to invest in this sort of thing to the on-the-ground projects that will be doing the work to regenerate degraded lands or protecting pristine ecosystems. Here's an important part from the page on natural capital. It's talking about eco-credits. And here you can read, Basin will create, source, and facilitate the purchase/sale and leasing/staking of natural capital and ecological assets, all derived from real estate. So this seems like there's a huge opportunity for all the ecosystem services and biodiversity that is not being valued by the market as it is, and Basin's going to create, source, and facilitate the purchase/sale of these natural capital and ecological assets. Continuing on here, everything Basin is creating is based on ecological and natural capital asset creation. Cash flow and store of value all derived from real estate, nature. We are building and connecting the infrastructure needed for natural capital markets, including the storytelling around it. This is really awesome in my opinion. Our market is not valuing nature, it's not valuing ecosystem services, and Basin sees a huge opportunity here and wants to be that project that will create, source, and facilitate the purchasing and selling of these natural capital and ecological assets. The next revenue source listed here is a broad category just called traditional. Whereas carbon markets are new and nature capital markets or eco credits are very new and haven't even been created yet, there's a lot of these tried and true ways to generate revenue via traditional methods. Here's a list of them, and the only one that stuck out to me was oil and gas. I'm just curious what the traditional way to make revenue with oil and gas is, and how that would play into the Basin project. And lastly, here are some other revenue models that they've described in their documentation. You can see in green that they've gotten some grant funding from Regen network and Gitcoin. I also highlighted in red that they are using real estate and oil and gas donations. That's cool if oil and gas companies, want to regenerate the earth. It's okay to accept their money. I just want this to be really transparent as well. They do have some documentation about tokenomics and some ideas, but they have this disclaimer up that it is in heavy development and iteration. So I'm not going to bother digging into the tokenomics right now. I'm going to wait for it to be a little more solidified before I do a deep dive there. Here you can see some information about the governance. So there's the Basin DAO, which has yet to be formally formed, and they're proposing a 1-to-1 token voting here with the Basin token, it seems. And also there's the Basin Trust. This is the holding company, perpetual evergreen trust, very long-term focused organization. And this one is token voting, but it also takes into account the value of your stake and how long you're locking up that stake, which I think that's really cool. And I'm hoping they can bring some of that innovation to the Basin DAO as well, instead of just 1-to-1 token voting. Here's the technical details. This is in heavy development and iteration, so none of this is locked in, but I'm seeing some heavy interest in the Ethereum ecosystem using these ERC standards. And they're saying L1 for store of value, L2 for transactions and flow of value. I love that. That sounds really good. They're looking at Regen network for their eco credits. I'll have to look into that more. And then also some possible uses of Gitcoin, Passport, charge particles, and drips and soulbound cross-chain functionality. Sounds cool. And that concludes our review of Basin. Congratulations if you made it all the way to the end of this video. I got all this information from their documents, which I will link in the description. They have a really great comprehensive set of documents, and you can see that it's a work in progress, and they're very inviting to get people, they want to bring people into the conversation to help build this project. I've definitely had my curiosity piqued, and I will be joining this community to see how I can be involved. I hope this video was really helpful and educational to you. Thank you so much. Bye.